Excellent. Back to a quick couple PowerPoint slides. The next kind of concept that I wanted to point out was the concept of page UI rules. Again, this is something that we used a lot in Gen 0 and Gen 1. We had a lot of requirements for this type of logic, I guess. So again, the question here is, do our clients have requirements to make fields like not visible on, based on certain conditional logic, or not editable, or make it required on certain conditional logic? So again, as I said, based on experience over the past few years with Gen 0 and Gen 1, we had, a number of requirements for this. So again, a main message here, won't spend a lot of time on this, guys, but if you hear requirements for this from our clients or from our partners, right? This, how we would actually configure that currently is through page UI rules. Now, currently there's a few rules regarding page UI rules, and that how to think about this conceptually is that, we define a set of rules for a specific page. So, the, sent PO view edit page, and the, sent invoice page could have two different sets of rules, but for a given page right now, there's one set of rules. So if you set, if you set conditional logic for fields not being visible, that's set kind of at a specific page level. And I can have a different set of logic or conditions for fields being not editable, or required, but they're specific to a given page. And again, we usually see this on the view edit page. Once those rules are in place, again, kind of think of it as a two-step process. I define my rules, and then I optionally have the capability to apply those rules to one or more fields. Okay. So I can define, a condition for, fields being not editable and apply that to just one field, or I can apply that same rule to multiple fields. Again, one thing to note, like currently, we do not have the ability to have different rules for different fields on a given page right now. So just want to make sure we understand kind of the rules here are the current capabilities, I guess, for page UI rules. Any questions there, guys? All right. Again, how does this translate to the OSE UI? How this looks is, again, we'll show you in live mode, but there's a toolbar button that activates for page UI rules, and then we get a push panel over here. This is a snap of the push panel, and then just like we saw there, there's kind of different conditions, right? So not visible condition, not editable, required, and so on. By default, those will be set to no, so there'll be no conditional logic defined. If we want to, like in this case, define conditional logic for fields not being editable, we toggle this to yes, and then we get this condition box. Okay. And again, within this condition box is where we specify our conditional logic. And again, just heads up here is that, it is, kind of syntax sensitive. So it basically is, I specify a field. In this case, oftentimes we've seen the logic's driven by what's the current state or the status, workflow state. And then, is it equal to or not equal to a certain value? So in this case, we're saying, define our logic to say fields are not going to be editable, when the state of that object instance is pending review in this case. Okay. Again, within here, it's a little bit code-like, which is, good and bad, depending upon if you like to code. It gives you quite a bit of capability here to define your conditional logic using logical operators like and or, not, or comparison operators, greater than, less than, so on, equal to, not equal to. It also supports some arithmetic operations within that. So again, main message here is this is kind of how it's specified. And it is kind of sensitive here to the syntax. So unless we're precise here, we may get an exception when we try to apply. Any questions there, guys?
I'm sorry, one last question.
Sure,
I just
Max.
want to make 100% sure we're clear on this. Can you go back one slide?
Sure, absolutely. For you, Max, anything, buddy.
Oh, I'll take you up on that later.
Yeah. What's up?
Just to make absolutely positively clear, that condition field, that is a JavaScript-like statement that is not JavaScript, correct?
I think I think that's fair. I don't know, Lucy, if that's how I interpret it. Yes, but
I just want to verify that that condition field is for JavaScript-like statement,
Yes, yes, it
is
is.
not for JavaScript.
It's for JavaScript like. They basically
Yeah.
adopted JavaScript conventions in the operators that they were providing.
Okay, thank you. I envision that being something that a lot of people have a lot of questions about who aren't in this room, and I just want to make absolutely sure.
yeah, no, it's a great question, Max, because hopefully here, time permitting, we'll get to workflows, and then we will see an instance where there is a text entry box, if you will, where we do drop actual JavaScript. So it's a key distinction, especially because they look very similar. Again, in the interest of time here, guys, let's not do the exercise here. I'll just kind of step through it real time, and just to kind of show you it on the UI. So if we drop back down here, view edit page, and we'll go into edit mode as soon as we can. And again, as we said, it's kind of a two-step process, right? One is first I define the rules. So this is the page UI rules toolbar button. That's going to open up something that, very similar to what we just saw. So again, if we say, say not visible on a certain condition, and then again, since, just to show you that, I'm just going to go in here and copy this. Just so I hopefully get my syntax right. And then let's say, okay, if the current state is, draft, just to change it up, I think it'll show better here, and apply that. That's again is defining the not visible condition for this entire page. Okay, when I apply that, and as of right now, that rule just exists. It's not being applied to any field here. So again, the second step in the process would be, well, let me go into, transaction identifier type, select that, and then I have to apply basically that rule to this field. So to do that, we come up here and configure UI rules. So that's a new button for us. We get a push panel, and right now by default, again, based on my experience building the pages initially, I think everybody is set, every field, excuse me, is set to no UI rules. Right now, the only option is paged UI rules. So if I select that, then basically what I'm saying is I'm applying that rule that I defined for the page to this particular field, and I select apply. And if I save that, that saves those changes one. And we'll just kind of step you through. So again, well, I changed it to draft because, by default, within the OSE editor, it views these as, these object instances as in draft. So if that was able to save successfully when we would go back to consumer mode or view mode, since we defined it as not visible on draft, then this field would not be visible kind of in consumer mode or view mode right here within OSE. I just wanted to point that out because, again, I think it's something that we're going to encounter fairly regularly from a requirement standpoint based on experience. All right. The next thing we wanted to talk about, again, since it's, I think, going to be fairly common, is kind of the workflow configuration. And we touched on this on Tuesday a little bit, but for each, object type, each object type will come kind of with a standard workflow config. This is the config for, if not all, the majority of our Mint objects. Again, it's a little bit more robust than what we'll see for Poet objects, which are a little bit simpler, but this is going to be our standard kind of config out of the box when we save a standard solution down to a company solution. Now, again, what we have the ability to do is, these are, configure basically substates below this, and then, company specific transitions, amongst those substates. Okay. Any questions there, guys? Again, what we'd like to do is kind of just show you how this is reflected within the OSE UI. I think that our time is better spent there. So if we go in under solutions and workflows, again, when I have a filter on here, so let me take that off. So right now, business object type is commerce sent purchase order. If I take that off, what we'll see is we're going to have a workflow out here for every business object type that we have within each of our solutions. But in this case, we just have the one solution, the OSE training Mint solution. So again, to find what we're interested in, again, we can filter and grab our commerce sent purchase order and apply that. We'll select the hyperlink here, and that will bring us basically kind of into edit, or not, bring into view mode, excuse me, for our workflow. And then let's jump into edit mode here. But what we'll see here kind of by default with our standard solution is under workflow states and transitions, we will see basically our base states, and that will correspond basically to what we just showed from a PowerPoint standpoint. So we have draft, submitted, prepare, inbound, process, inbound. That's kind of what we saw over here. Okay. And then the arrows basically represent transitions or allowable transitions between those states. We don't see those, at this level, but if we drill down, so if we drill down draft, we'll see that we can transition from the base state of draft to the state of submitted. So again, that corresponds really to just what we saw there on the PowerPoint slide. Again, if I'm in submitted, I can go from submitted to prepare inbound. So this is kind of how we define that picture, if you will, of what are our base states and what are the valid transitions. So again, welcome any input from, Alok, Lakshmi, Oriel, but I think, based on our experience with Gen 1, I think it's really helpful if you start with something like this with our clients or even our partners, if we're working with them, and say, okay, this is what comes out of the box standard, how do we want to change that, right? And then update this diagram with our substates and various substate transitions to define how we would like this ultimately configured, right? And again, and make sure everybody's on the same page. There's no confusion. All right. So again, if we want to configure this, we need to add what's called substates and then add the corresponding transitions. So again, from the UI standpoint, how we do that. So if, from a prepare inbound, say we want to add a substate, where we want a review process, for instance. Again, what we can do, if we want to add, this will activate here, we want to add, and then we basically, whenever we add a substate, we need to specify the base state that substate corresponds to. So we have to be, have that association. So we're going to say it's going to be a substate of prepare inbound. The substate is going to be review. And then we can have a display name such as that. And again, the start state, we can toggle this on if we want the capability for this object instance to basically transition when it's created into a given substate. So again, we had that requirement for Sanofi, I believe, back in Gen 0, Gen 1 days. So if we apply that, what we'll see in this display is that we've just basically added a row, right? So we'll see that it's a substate, very quickly and easily here. That's called review, and its parent base state is prepare inbound. Then the next step in the journey is that we want to be able to specify what are the valid transitions for this substate. Now, again, a user tip here, guys, is that when we specify the transition, we'll basically kind of select where it's transitioning to. But if we're creating one or more substates, again, my usage tip is create your one or more substates first and then save. That way, when you're creating transitions, it's going to recognize those substates. If you don't save it first, those substates will not be there to select when you define your transitions. All right, so go back into edit mode. And then we basically want to say, okay, where are we going to transition this guy to? So right now we're not transitioning this anywhere. So we can select our to state. And again, this is where it's important to is save that so that our substates will appear here, but we're going to transition from this new substate of review to process inbound. So we'll select that. And then again, here is back to Max's question. This is kind of the key distinction is that whenever we define a transition, a new transition like this, we have the capability to actually drop in actual, compressed JavaScript into, these two text boxes. So it looks very similar to what we saw for the page UI rules, but it's a little bit different. And again, here, similar to Gen 0 and Gen 1, we have the capability to specify, logic through JavaScript at 2 points in this process. One is called the transition condition. So this JavaScript would be executed and evaluated prior to this transition being executed. So if we had logic in here that had a number of checks and those checks failed, we wouldn't allow this transition to occur for that instance of the object. Like the second kind of place that we can drop JavaScript in, is called a transition action. And basically what that gives us the capability to do is define logic that can be expressed in JavaScript to actually be executed after the transition occurs. So again, you think about it. So if we transition from review to process inbound, the client may have the requirement to execute a certain set of logic. If we code that into JavaScript, drop that in here, that's how we actually execute that and implement that requirement for the client. So again, it's like when they transition state to state, they have a certain transition where they want to kick off kind of some outbound integration, if you will, kind of for this discussion. So that's coded here as a transition action. So once we make that transition successfully, we kick off some outbound integration as an example. Any questions there, guys? So again, this is true JavaScript that would be developed, compressed, and dropped in here.
John, one quick question. So in terms of the base workflow states, so that would differ based on the type of solution that you are, building, right? Based on, let's say, if you're building like a Mint solution, then, you have a set of, base states specific to Mint. Maybe Poet may have different base states. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, that is a very accurate statement. And fortunately for you, in the Poet world, it's a little bit simpler, and there's fewer base states.
Yes, thankfully.
Yeah, the world of processing a B2B transaction is complicated. And because of all the little steps and transformations and honestly handoffs from Opus to Mint, back out to Opus and so on. That's why this is so complicated. But when you're in the world of Poet, it's just a vanilla business object that, lives kind of by itself, and it gets to do like your simple, to do in process done, like your super simple world. But this, it's because it's participating in a B2B process and doing B2B things are very involved. That's why we've got all these different things that are in here. And these are places where people sometimes, because you're integrating truly system to system, from one company to another, there's lots of different hooks where people may want to interject special behavior based on their requirements. And because we've got the UI as a modality to that, it's not just transactions flowing, but there's a UI in there. And so that's why you see so many different steps. It looks complicated, but when you get all your customer requirements, you become thankful that these are there. Otherwise, you would have to say no all the time to things that they want. So.
Yep. No, it's a great point, Lucy. Right? Yeah, from the standpoint of not having to say no. Yep. Again, kind of same UI. In the process basically is, you just as we saw, you have an available company solution just where we've been. And the key here is that we are just kind of in edit mode for that solution. And again, we said we can activate it. It can still be in edit mode. We can continue to edit it even though it's activated and being, reflected in Mint. But if we want to say we're doing that in validation, at the point we say we want to, promote that, if you will, to production, is when it's important to kind of advance that solution. So again, the solution is just another object, just like a business object. It has a workflow. So if we promote that kind of from edit up to released, that actually posts that solution kind of out of available into what's called the company catalog. Back to our original discussion. And then once that's in that company catalog, we should be able to access it from both validation kind of and production, assuming that, our TLIDs match for the validation and production companies. So we should see that released here in validation. And then if I go into production and go to my company catalog, I should see that same solution there and available in production and available to be activated, in production. So that's kind of how that works and how the company catalog comes into play when we're promoting a solution from validation to production. And again, the note here is that it may take a little bit of time. So if you don't see it immediately there when you're on the production side looking for it, give it 15 or 30 minutes, and there's a sync process that gets executed and before you can see that in production. So, any questions there, guys? All right, but again, I think main thing is there are a number of resources out here from a procedure standpoint. If we need them as kind of a reference beyond what we're doing here in training. And that applies both to OSE and ORD. All right, take a checkpoint. I guess maybe Caitlin, I don't know what your thoughts are. Do we want to wrap this up, or do I want to expressly introduce ORD?
I was just slacking with you. I know you're on this
Oh,
thing.
yes,
I think we should close it out, and then you and I can discuss how we manage ORD going forward.
Okay, that's great. I guess before we part, any other questions on anything we've covered on Tuesday or Thursday from an OSE standpoint? Well, all right. Must have lulled you all to sleep.
No, you are very good.
Very good. Yeah, no.
Thank you, John. This has been excellent.
Yeah, no, that's
Thanks,
great. No,
John.
and I thank you all for the questions and the participation, because when the more interactive it is, it's always better. So thanks very much for that, folks. Appreciate it.